Welcome, everyone, and welcome back to another episode in our Pollstar Live Digital Sessions interview series. I'm very happy to be joined by two individuals today who have a lot to celebrate this year. To be fair, it's all been a bit subdued, obviously, due to the worldwide crisis we're all in. So, while that is definitely sad to consider, there is still a lot to talk about. And um, the two individuals I spoke of are Lucy Noble and Craig Hassall, the artistic and commercial director and CEO, respectively, of the Royal Albert Hall, one of the world's most iconic buildings. The venue turns 150 years this year, uh, on the
This
29th of
month, actually,
March.
Gideon.
Yeah,
This month, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
29th of March to be exact. And I don't want to really talk too much about the worldwide crisis, but it's obviously the elephant in the room. So I was thinking we could maybe get that out the way first, because I'm sure it must have interrupted your celebrations, the planning for it, which was announced in 2018, and you actually were organizing a whole year of celebrations starting on the 29th of March. So I reckon once when the crisis hit, you must have been in the middle of the conversations and in the middle of scheduling. So it must have come as a real shock. Can you just take us through what, how it hit you back in March, how you had to reorganize, what went through your minds, and up to the point today where we are in terms of rescheduling shows?
Yeah, sure. Well, I suppose I should talk about the macro, and Lucy can talk about the detail, I guess. As you said, Gideon, we've been planning the 150th for some time, and for any venue to turn 150 is a huge milestone. And for the Royal Albert Hall, it's so well known all around the world to so many artists and academics and institutions and charities and all sorts of things. And what we're trying to do, and what Lucy has done really well, is try to represent all of the various elements of the Royal Albert Hall in the 150th, and it was all there. It was all going well. I'll just talk about the timing a bit, then I'll throw to Lucy. So originally it was going to be starting last November and then running for the whole of this year. And I suppose the only positive I can see is that everyone that was involved, that we've had to reschedule, has tried to remain involved. So no one has said, oh, actually, you know what, count us out because the dates don't work. Everyone's madly trying to still be involved in the 150th. And so as a result, we've decided to stretch the period of the celebration. And we're now up to 2023 because there are so many events that we still want to do. So it's still really, really busy. And it's going to be fantastic, but just over a longer period of time. So that's putting a positive spin on what's a really invasive event for the whole music industry around the world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you maybe, Lucy, you could talk a bit more about the concrete negotiations with all the parties involved, because as you said, it was a whole year that you planned. And what I'm particularly curious about is and I'm aware you won't be able to give like a all-encompassing or concrete answer here, given all the uncertainties, even surrounding the Prime Minister's most recent announcement. Obviously, uncertainties remain, but can you just indicate whether you ever considered, falling back on one of the options that this COVID time has brought up, like live streaming, or was it always clear to you that no, this has to be a proper celebration with actual live gigs with a live audience?
I think in terms of the first part of your question, the preparing for the 150th, it's a huge year for the hall. It's such an amazing anniversary, and we've been working towards it for half a decade. And so it was disappointing to be in this situation, opening up on 150th year. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have managed to move some events, and as Craig said, people are very supportive, and we have a whole raft of amazing music industry ambassadors who have been helping us to secure some amazing artists for 150th. It might not be this year, it might be next year, or even 2023, as Craig said, but they have been brilliant and are really supportive. And so everything that we had planned hopefully will still happen, but just at different times, really. So we're still very excited about it. And then in terms of live streaming, I think the experience at the Royal Albert Hall is obviously based on having a live in-person experience, and we have been doing live streaming and a whole host of behind closed doors events. We did a series at the beginning of the pandemic, which is called Royal Albert Home,
Mhm.
and with artists playing from their various homes, which was great. But we've also recognised there's no substitute for coming to see a gig in person, and that's what's really exciting about the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we released a very short film last week, Gideon. It's just like a minute or two long, called "Your Room Will Be Ready." It's on YouTube, and "Your Room Will Be Ready." It's Tom Harper directed it, and Mick Jagger's narrating it, and it's basically Mick Jagger reading a W.H. Auden poem with images of an empty Royal Albert Hall, and in between are really very brief, very loud bits of our history. So Jimi Hendrix and the Stones and the Beatles, Adele, and so on. And it was all done just to remind people how impactful the live experience is. And Lucy's right. Digital is great, streaming is great, and we've done a lot of amazing digital stuff, but nothing can replace the live experience. And the whole industry is feeling that across the world. We're all desperate to get back onto stage and back into venues, and the interaction with the audience and performers is just so missing. And it's something we say the Royal Albert Hall is particularly unique because of the shape of the building. The audience is almost on stage and the performers are almost in the audience. So that connection between audience and performer is particularly strong at the Royal Albert Hall, and we just miss it so much, and we just want it back. That's the message.
I think the artists miss it as well. We talk about the audiences and us, but they will do live streaming, but it's mostly without audiences at the moment. And again, you just don't get that audience connection as an artist when you have an empty room, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, those live streams that I did find engaging, that I saw, they did usually feature like a really elaborate setting, or at least it was almost cinematically produced, so you had a different thing that engaged you about it. And I guess the Royal Albert Hall, obviously, I mean, Niall Horan and the classical opera singer
Catherine Jenkins.
Yeah.
They both, I mean, it looks spectacular, but it's a totally different animal, of course.
Yeah, but you're right. You get angles you can never get when the hall's full of people. And the same with the proms last year. The proms went ahead last year with no audience, and it meant for the TV producer, it was a dream for him because he could put cameras wherever he wanted. He could do close-ups and all sorts of things. So it's not to denigrate a streamed or filmed performance, but I guess it's just not a replacement for it. It can't replace the sort of visceral experience of having an audience right there or having a performer right there. It's so unique.
Well, it's amazing to hear, though, and this is the last crisis-related question, I guess, but it's amazing to hear that the industry is so supportive and that everybody's still so up for celebrating whenever that might be, because you see other iconic events, like for instance in Germany where I'm right now, Rock am Ring and Rock im Park, two of the most iconic festivals over here, they also just scrapped their birthday basically. So I just wanted to make sure the celebrations will happen. It's just
we're just guaranteeing more hangovers. It's a longer party.
Yes,
absolutely going to happen.
Yeah.
So Lucy, 2021 also marks your 20th anniversary of working inside the building, if I'm correct, because
God,
you started as lettings manager.
How did you get that piece of information?
Yeah, last time we spoke, which is quite a few years ago, but back then I had the information you started as lettings manager in 2001, which would then obviously be a big anniversary for you as well.
Yeah, she was a high school intern, Gideon, just to be clear. She was 11 years old.
I thought you
yeah,
well,
happy to put that out there.
In answer to that, I think you're asking me, I don't know, what are you asking me? Do I love working at the Royal Albert Hall? I do.
The concrete question is, can you believe it's 20 years already, and can you encapsulate that time in one word or one sentiment?
Oh, wow. That's a really difficult question to answer. I suppose I would say magical, really, because I think the hall is magical. And I have been at the hall a long time, but I've done lots of different jobs, and I've been lucky enough to have lots of opportunities at hall, and it is an amazing place to work. It is, you know, my mind, the best venue in the world, the most beautiful venue in the world. So but that's what I would say, magical.
Nice.
And Gideon, can I chip in and just say, I've
course.
been there not even 4 years, and you know, Lucy's been there for a long time. I knew Lucy from years ago as well. And actually, what's interesting is that Lucy is the one that's always pushing for different things at the hall. So, you know, you would think that someone who'd been in a place like that for so long might be a bit in a rut, but it's the opposite. Lucy is the one that's always saying, we've tried that. Let's change. Let's do something else. Let's do more things beyond the main stage. Let's get more new artists involved and so on. So, you know, Lucy, ironically, is a force for change at the Royal Albert Hall because of her experience of the hall, knowing what we've done in the past. She's the one that's always saying, I think we should try something new and something different. So, yeah, I find it's quite magical for me too, Lucy. Yeah.
I mean,
I'd never said it to your face, by the way.
Thank you, Craig.
Well, that brings me right to the next question I have for you, Lucy. Although I first wanted to ask Craig, yeah, you first came into the contact with the hall even before you joined as CEO, as a promoter, I guess, because you were like really experienced, got a lot of promoter experience in the UK as well, before then going back to Australia and leading the Opera Australia, and then coming back to the hall as CEO. How does your vast experience as a promoter influence the way you're running the hall today?
It's a good question, Gideon. So I've kind of had two previous interactions with the hall. First is when I was running English National Ballet. We would do arena ballets, or we still do, they still do, with the hall. So I first encountered the team as a co-presenter, effectively. And then I went back to Australia and I came back after that. And then with Gabes, I was working as a promoter. And I suppose the difference there is it was purely commercial, whereas the English National Ballet Association that's a subsidized government organization, government funded organization. So it was, I suppose, slightly more artistic, whereas Gabes is also very artistic, but commercially driven. And it's been two interactions. And what I find now, you know, running the hall is that it kind of reinforces what a weird creature the Royal Albert Hall is. We keep saying it's the most eclectic venue in the world. And I look at all the things we do in a year, and this is where I'm sorry, Lucy, to say this again. Someone like Lucy is so important because Lucy is classically trained as a flautist, but also understands the rock and pop world really well. So she can straddle, you know, a Mahler symphony to the Nine Inch Nails, and that also is the Royal Albert Hall. That's the kind of DNA of the hall, that we are so many things to so many people, I guess, which is why it's such a loved place. And sometimes we have to put our artistic hat on and think this is a very important thing to do for the art form, for contemporary dance or for ballet or for opera or for, you know, rock and pop emerging artists. And it may not make as much money as something else could do. And other times I think this is going to make us a lot of money. And it's really important because we need the money. We don't receive government funding. And actually this very commercial activity, which returns huge hospitality profits and so on, actually funds the other one. So the more artistic things that we really love and want to do are funded by the commercial things that we also love to do, and we love them equally. And part of the tussle, and this is really Lucy's tussle, I guess, is how do you choose? What's the mix between, you know, a very, very commercial activity at the hall versus, you know, a university graduation ceremony or a brass band competition or an education project or a dance season? And we want to do them all, and there aren't enough days in the year. And that's why I love that about the hall. I can't think of another place where I could do this job and have that kind of variety and that tension of art and commerce, you know, every day. I love it for that.
But just as a follow up on that, like, because like I know it's like just a couple of years in, you taking over as CEO, you installed the new speaker system, and then another huge upgrade was obviously the Great Excavation, and both catered to a touring audience, I'd say, because the system you installed is very widely used in touring, and I guess part of the Great Excavation was also to expand the backstage facilities, etc., for artists. So did you or would you say it was a conscious move to become even more suitable for the world's tours? Not that you needed it by the names you attracted even up to that point.
Yeah, I guess I would say one thing that everyone at the hall seems to have as philosophy: we don't sit on our hands. We're not complacent about the fact that we're a really famous building, because actually we're still competing in the rock and pop world, in the events world, in the award ceremonies world. You know, there's a lot of competing markets and competing venues, and so we think our obligation is to compete and make sure we are the preeminent venue. You know, it's not cheap to hire the Royal Albert Hall, so we got to make sure that what you get when you hire it is fantastic service and great facilities. And there's a kind of philosophical point as well, that we think, you know, we are a charity, and we don't have any shareholders, or there's no dividends to pay out. So any money that we make has to, under our constitution, go back into the building or into education programs. And when I say back into the building, we think that means not just keeping it as it is, but keeping it state of the art as much as we can, given it's a great unlisted building. So, you know, the speaker system, the D&B system, which is, you know, it's the best in the world, we would say that's not improving the hall, that's keeping pace with the industry. You know, that's what you should expect when you come to a place like the Royal Albert Hall. You should have the best sound system in the world, and the D&B system is the best in the world. Similarly, backstage, you know, we have so many different groups using the hall. One night it's the BAFTAs, where you have lots of requirements for individual dressing rooms for all the divas and the stars. The next night could be the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra with a huge choir, so you need really big congregation spaces. So we need to have really multi-function back of house facilities to satisfy every requirement from hirers as well. So that's our obligation, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the sound system as well, Gideon, part of the difficulty with having amazing touring shows is that we were having a different sound system in the venue every night. And it's actually nearly impossible to create amazing sound with systems that are being brought in overnight. And we wanted the sound to be fantastic for every show that came in. And Craig uses a very good term, saying we're kind of creating a democracy of sound. Some people can sit in one spot and it'd be fantastic, and they can sit in another spot and it wouldn't be so good. But now the sound is fantastic throughout the whole hall, and it just means that everyone, all the audiences and the artists, have a really amazing experience and uplifted experience and better sound experience. And it's very easy also to get the sound wrong at the Royal Albert Hall if you're bringing a system in that is created just for other venues. The hall is a unique space, as you know. It's not easy to get the sound right.
Yeah, and the sound when the sound wasn't right, people would blame the building. They'd say, "Oh, the sound's terrible at the Royal Albert Hall," but it's not. The system was terrible that was being brought in. So we wanted to fix that by really taking over that technology and saying, "This is a system which works. We have sound engineers in house. It'll make it just excellent every time."
Yeah. You mentioned the eclectic programming, and I mean, I don't have numbers to back this up, but you could argue that the programming off the main stage is almost as extensive or even more eclectic than what's going on the main stage, and that's always been, I know, Lucy, a big thing for you. Can you just talk a bit about the importance of the educational as well as the charitable work for which the hall is very well known, that does not necessarily take place on the main stage, even though charitable events take place on the main stage as well. Why is it so important to you, and is that set to continue?
Yeah, it will absolutely continue. And all the smaller events that we do outside the main auditorium in the other spaces, they actually offer an opportunity that the main space can't. And those are things like allowing lower ticket prices. I think our average ticket price in the main auditorium is something like £52, and we do events for free, or £10 in those other spaces. That means that we get different kinds of audiences that perhaps wouldn't come to the Royal Albert Hall. We also offer artists and younger artists the opportunity to perform those spaces who, again, wouldn't normally perform on our main stage. But it means that we're developing some kind of talent pipeline, and means that we can support those artists on the way up. And we've had many people that have performed in our Elgar room, which is our main secondary space, who then actually go on to perform in the main space. And those have been some really nice stories. And so it's great. And it also brings the hall alive in the daytime. and we do a lot of daytime events, which kind of falls into the education and outreach area as well. And we have this amazing education and outreach program, and we engage with around about 200,000 people each year. And we work with mums and babies right through to the elderly who have dementia or might be lonely, and everybody else in between. And often it links in with what's happening on our main stage. So we might put a performance on our main stage where the tickets are just £5, and we have something called Friendship Matinees that is mainly aimed at elderly people who are a bit lonely, and they come and they see a performance, and they wouldn't normally be able to afford to come to somewhere like the Royal Albert Hall, let alone even actually afford to get the bus or something like that. It's just, those are obstacles for people and younger people from challenged background. And we offer those opportunities so that we're welcoming different kinds of people to the hall and welcoming everyone to the hall. And it's really, really important to what we do. And it's at the heart of what we do at the hall.
And speaking of the variety of events that have been taking place on the main stage, I mean, it's quite staggering. And is there anything you wouldn't or couldn't host at the hall?
You probably can't answer that, Lucy. There have been a few things that Lucy said, we're not having that. But you probably can't say what they are.
That's fair enough.
No.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, really.
We haven't had pole dancing, have we, Lucy?
No.
No.
Haven't gone there.
We've had ballroom dancing. We've had Mexican wrestling, masked wrestling. Gosh.
But we do program, Gideon. We do choose what goes on our stage. And sometimes we do have to say no to people. And that might be because we don't think they can sell enough tickets, not necessarily because we don't think it's suitable for the Royal Albert Hall. Sometimes we might say, if we had a venue that was 1,000 seats, then you'd be in. But, there's lots of things that we consider when we book someone in to play on the main stage.
Actually, we have had historically, there have been political events at the hall that you look back at now with some alarm and you think, goodness me, someone hired the hall for that event. And it's not, some of them are great, like the suffragettes had rallies at the hall to get the right for women to vote, which is fantastic. But there also were sort of the 50s, and even even in the 80s, there was some rather extremist protest rallies at the hall, with values that I don't personally agree with, but it's space you can hire and say your view. And so there's a fairly checkered history of the Royal Albert Hall, in good and bad ways. So it's a fascinating history when you look into it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do luckily you have this time machine on your website, which is quite detailed. So
yeah, it's also it's unedited, Gideon. Even the bad bits are in the time machine. So
speaking of the building's history, which obviously makes it a grade 1 listed building, does that create, first part of the question, any challenges working inside? I mean, I as far as I understood, the great excavation itself had to go underground because of the status, and you couldn't simply extend the building up above ground. Is that true? And are there other challenges that come with dealing with such a historic building?
Yeah, well, so I'll have a go first, Lucy. So yeah, there definitely are. I mean, it's an amazing building. The fact that it was built is a miracle. It's so large. It was supposed to be larger, but thank goodness it's not. It's quite large enough. There are challenges because it wasn't built to accommodate the number of shows that it has today. When it opened, it had, I think, 30 or 40 shows a year, and now it has 400 shows a year. So the changeover and the load ins and load outs and all these things, it really stresses the building. And a lot of the work we're doing back of house, as you say, the great excavation and so on, are really to accommodate better back of house movement. So this is a tiny thing and a really boring thing, but it's really important. Part of the great excavation was moving a grade 1 listed staircase so that we had proper separation between back of house and front of house. Because before that, I mean, even like 2 years ago, at the end of a show, the roadies were pushing road cases into the corridor and people were trying to leave the hall. So it was really dangerous. So now that it's separate and that won't happen again. So that's just a small thing, but really important. The building, yeah, it does have challenges, but at the same time, it was really well designed. we have to, again, back to the thing about keeping it maintained and contemporary. We're just in the middle of a massive project to upgrade the ventilation and the cooling of the building. And this began before COVID, and it's really important to keep the building properly ventilated, but even more so now. You know, there's a lot of talk in the press about how important ventilation is for schools, museums, venues. So for us, we'd already started this, but we changed the scope last year to include more COVID-ready ventilation. And that's going to serve us very well when we reopen again, you know, in a few months. And they're just small things, but they're not really, they're really big things actually for the way the hall works. And we've got to keep pace all the time with audience expectations and artist expectations back of house, whilst, you know, respecting the grade 1 listing. And but you're right, there's no way we couldn't put a glass tower on top or a big carbuncle beside it. We're not allowed to do any of those things. So we can only go down. There's only one quarter left that hasn't been dug up. So that's in our sights though.
Yeah. And yeah, on the other hand, what makes it particularly rewarding working in a building like that?
Lucy, you go first.
Okay. For me, it's the diversity of what's on the stage. You know, Craig was saying similar a while ago. You can go in one day and see Stormzy on the stage, and then you can go in the next day and see school children performing, and they're all equally as special and equally as moving. And I think that's what I particularly love. You could go to work at another venue which is just classically orientated or just rock and pop orientated, but we just have it all at the hall. And obviously the building is beautiful as well. And you do walk into auditorium and just think this is just a stunning building. And that plays a large part of our success, of course, I believe.
Yeah, when I came from Australia, the day I arrived back in London, I went to the hall for, it was Teenage Cancer Trust, and Ed Sheeran was the lead. Actually, the support act was TBC, and it ended up being Noel Gallagher Unplugged, and then followed by Ed Sheeran. This is my first day in London. I thought, I've landed on my feet. This is the most amazing place I've ever worked, and it remains that this day. You know, 2 weeks after I started, I was walking out after work, and there's a sound check. I thought I'll just pop in and have a look at. And it was the Pretenders doing a sound check. You think, oh, man, I'm so blessed. It's amazing. But I think what makes it really special is, as Lucy said, it's the diversity of what's on stage, but it's also just the shape of the place. You know, the fact that the stage is kind of a third of the way into the auditorium void. When you have something like the BAFTAs, the award ceremony, or the Olivier Awards, or you have a solo performer like Adele, where they're actually placed, the audience is all around them. It's physically around them and above them. So it's not like a cross arch hall where there's this wall between the audience and the performers. The performers are out in the audience. So for the performers, they feel that they're in the audience, and the audience feel they're practically on stage. And that dynamic, I think, is so important to the frisson that makes the hall such a special place. So yeah, it's wonderful.
I think also, I'm sure Craig will agree with that, it's the staff that work there as well. We feel like we're a big family, and I think it's a really special atmosphere, special working atmosphere. And I think that's all of those things combined is why people do actually often stay quite a long time working at the Royal Albert Hall.
20 years, Lucy?
Oh, stop it.
I mean,
Well done,
human beings tend to be like to get used to things quite fast, right? So what do you think, do you feel you'd ever get used to, you know, seeing a packed hall, excited at what's going on the main stage, or why are you pretty sure that's not going to happen?
So first of all, I'd say, based on our audience's reaction to lockdown, you know, we've had to reschedule and move so many shows. As I said earlier in the interview, the promoters don't want to not do the show. So most promoters want to just move their show to a different date. And most people who'd booked tickets don't want a refund. They want to move to the date that the show is on. So I feel that audiences will come back. It's odd to say that now. And even as we plan for reopening, you know, in July or around then, just to imagine the hall again full of people feels so foreign. We've all been locked in our houses for a year. but I think we'll get over that pretty quickly. I think certainly the staff
Mm.
are desperate to get back. You know, we try and keep in touch with all our staff who are furloughed. I do videos to the staff and we chat to them, and the emails back are just so positive. People just want to get back into the hall and do what they do. And I think audiences and certainly artists also, as you said. So yeah, I think we'll bounce back.
I mean, can you each maybe name one of the most memorable nights for each of you that you've experienced at the hall? I know this is an unfair question with the amount of events that are going on. It doesn't have to be the most spectacular one, but just something that comes to mind that kind of captures like the magic of witnessing an event inside the building.
Can you go first, Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. That's a question we get asked often, and
yes,
it's very difficult to answer because they are all so different, and you love them all in different ways. But one that I do remember was when Nelson Mandela, because for historical reasons, really, when Nelson Mandela was first released from prison, and we had a special African concert for him at the Royal Albert Hall. And just to be there in his presence, and the whole hall was up dancing, and all of the royal family were there, and Nelson Mandela was dancing, and just, I will never forget that, just because it was such an important moment as well, and the concert was fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, I mean, I could go on and on. I could.
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, I'm gonna say one that's gonna sound so trivial compared to Lucy's, but it's just the first that springs to mind. And Lucy's right. There are so many, whether it's a film premiere or an award ceremony or festival of remembrances, so many things. But for me, I suppose I hadn't been at the hall very long, and we had craft work in, and it was a 3D show. So everyone was wearing these white glasses, and so it's like a sort of 50s sci-fi film. The whole hall in white 3D glasses. And craftwork, I grew up with craftwork in Australia. I think only one of the members is surviving, but there's the 4 guys on stage, not moving, doing the songs that I knew from university. And in fact, I had a spare seat. We have a box that we use to entertain donors and sponsors and various people. And I had a spare seat, and I saw one of the young guys in marketing. I said, "Oh, do you want to sit in the box because I've got a spare seat?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." And at the end of the show, I mean, I loved it, of course. I said to him, "Why are you even here? You're like, what are you, like 20, 22 years old?" And he said, "Craig, are you crazy? These guys are the grandfathers of electronica. Without Kraftwerk, there's no Daft Punk, there's no Chemical Brothers, there's blah, blah, blah." And he said, this is like a religious ceremony for me. I thought, well, actually, it is for me too. So, that was mine, Kraftwerk.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's a good one.
I mean, I've spoken to one promoter who said the one building that he could even imagine coming close in terms of prestige and historic significance may be the Sydney Opera House. And since we have, okay, well, that's the answer then.
No, sorry, it's Pollstar International. It is. No, I love the Sydney Opera House. What an amazing. Well, I used to run Opera Australia, so I know the Sydney Opera House very well.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, do you concur?
Well, I do. I tell you, there's an interesting thing. This is not my theory, but someone else's theory about what are considered icons in terms of buildings. And icons are buildings that you can draw the shape of in one go. So like the Empire State Building is an icon, the Eiffel Tower is an icon, Sydney Opera House, the Royal Albert Hall. And architects, when they're designing signature skyscrapers, often try and design an icon because they want people to be able to draw it in one go. So I think we are an icon. I mean, the Royal Albert Hall is absolutely an icon for so many art forms, and actually Sydney Opera House, of course, is as well. I suppose the only confusing thing is the Sydney Opera House is called an opera house. It's not really an opera house. It's a multi-venue art centre, and the Royal Albert Hall is definitely a hall. It's what we call the Nations Village Hall, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it really is a hall for so many purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But the Opera House, it's a nice building. It's a great location. What can I say? It's at the end of a road. Well,
Yeah. Lucy, do you have any venue you love going to outside the hall?
No, she doesn't. Oh, sorry, Lucy, you answer.
I like going to the grassroots venue. There's an amazing little gypsy jazz venue that I go to occasionally, although not for a while with the pandemic, called Le Cucumber in Battersea. And I like those kind of underground places, actually, but have often go to all the other major venues.
Yeah,
I like those fringe venues. Like Carnegie Hall is a nice fringe venue. I like to go to that one as well. Hollywood Bowl. Just up and coming venues, Lucy. I like those too. Yeah. Oh, the O2. That's where is that? That's East London.
Yeah,
isn't
never
it?
heard of that.
Never heard of it. Yeah, we love the O2. We love AEG.
Yeah, of course. No, it's just
Yeah.
just interesting of if if you're so say spoiled by, I mean that if you for an outsider, I imagine you're so spoiled by concerts and this amazing building, like why would you even consider going elsewhere? But that's why I'm just interested in if there any other
But
buildings
actually,
you like.
well, I think a point to make it in as well, this is a pandemic upside. There aren't many, but one thing we've found during this, and Lucy is the chair of the National Arena Association, is there's been incredible camaraderie between the venues during the pandemic. And so venues that we should see as competitors, we've been really open, and they have with us as well. And that's all around the world. We've all shared our war stories. We've all shared remobilization plans. We've shared, booking details, all sorts of things, which, are kind of commercial secrets. But the pandemic has been so divisive of the industry. The industry has really come together, actually, and that's been a very positive thing. And I hope that spirit remains after we come out of COVID. But it's been encouraging.
I'm sure it will. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're confident that it will remain, because that's another question I've been asking a lot of the live entertainment professionals I've been speaking to over this past year, is like, because everybody confirmed that there is more collaboration. And I mean, certainly what you say about everyone wanting to reschedule their shows, that you certainly seem to have everyone like realizing we're in the same boat together. So are you confident this is maybe as another upside that could come out of this pandemic? That we'll keep like this?
I think so. I'd like to think so, but I'm quite glass half full. I think so because, when you think about it, I mean, I don't think we're really competing with each other. We don't really compete with the O2. If an artist wants to play the O2, they'll play the O2. If a member of the audience wants to go to see a show at the O2, they'll go to the O2, or they'll go to, I don't know, Brixton Academy. I mean, there's enough audiences to go around and enough acts to go around. So I think it'd be really great if we can keep this camaraderie going once we reopen, and not be so competitive and walls up. But we'll see.
And also, Gideon, the new live group has started during this. I'm sure you've heard about that group. And I sit on there because of my job with the NAA, National Arenas Association. And that really has brought the industry together. Craig's been meeting with the CEOs of various international venues. And the live group is kind of mostly representing the music industry, but it's great to have promoters, agents, but also the festivals and managers, all venues all working together. And it's been absolutely integral, actually, during this pandemic. It's been really valuable. So that is definitely going to continue.
Yeah. I mean, there's one more question that you probably have been asked a gazillion times, but I just feel like I have to ask it, which is any artists that you haven't managed to get yet that you would still love to see on stage?
Shall I go, Lucy? There's quite a few.
You go.
Well, actually, so Neil Warnock he's the chair of our 150th committee. And I keep saying to Neil, can you please get Dolly Parton with a guitar on a bar stool at the? That's all I ask. Dolly Parton doing anything would be great. I just think she's such an icon of the music industry and such a champion of the music industry. Country music and young songwriters and so on. If we had her there, as part of a bigger education program with young songwriters, she's a champion of women's rights. I think she'd be phenomenal to get. That'd be my pick, I suppose.
And what does Neil say when you ask him?
He keeps changing the topic. He then orders another bottle of wine. I don't know. He just.
Lucy, how about you?
Oh, I think Lucy may have frozen. She's actually turned the Wi-Fi off because she doesn't want to answer the question.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're back. Okay. I'd like to get the up-and-coming artists like Arlo Parks and people like that, kind of now, but also we haven't had people like Metallica or Chili Peppers or Foo Fighters, those kind of huge kind of rock bands. We've never had Madonna, although those are heritage acts. Well, they are now, but alongside getting those artists that are breaking and getting them right at the start of their careers is really important, I think, and seeing the Royal Albert Hall as their home forever.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And just because you mentioned your position in the Arenas Association, I've just been wondering, some more technical question, but I guess would be nonetheless interesting for our readers, is the hall obviously is also run in a very unique way. It's structured in a very unique way. As you said, you don't receive any government funding at all. I'm assuming that didn't change during this this downtime.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, having such an overview of so many different buildings and how they're run, did you have extra support, from your private owners in this time? Have you been doing so well that you could just afford to, leave the door shut during the downtime, or how do you manage if if there's no state funding available?
Well, I'll tell you. So we're about 30 million pounds in a hole. We had reserves, and the reserves were earmarked to do things like finishing off the great excavation and other projects. They were all stalled and deferred. And so we lived off our savings, basically. And then we also asked, we have donors who give to us philanthropically, and we asked them if they would honor their pledges and bring their donations forward and untag them. So a lot of the donations were tagged with certain projects, and they pretty much all agreed to do that. And then we're in the process of taking out a loan from government, not funding, but a loan through the COVID recovery scheme. And that's pretty likely. We've agreed, we haven't got the money yet, but we've signed a loan agreement. And it's important to say it's a loan, it's not a grant. There were 3 rounds of grants last year, and we weren't eligible for any of them, unfortunately. And there'll be a 4th one out soon, which probably won't be eligible for either. But the loan will just keep us in business. And for a place like us, what we ask of government is just let us open. If we can open, we can trade our way out of this, because we do well at the box office. We can look after ourselves, but we've got to be able to put shows on. And just performing, just getting the shows on is the most important thing. And not just for us, but and I'm sure you know this, getting the whole ecosystem of freelance artists and freelance crew and smaller companies like lighting supply companies, staging companies, they all rely on places like us and other venues around London, around the UK. And until we're open, the whole sector is really, it's such a loss. So that's our plea, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wish, like, I don't know, I feel like, I mean, it's a no-brainer really, but this business is, the professionals running this business are the most experienced individuals on the planet, literally, when it comes to hosting audiences safely, whatever that means. I mean, there have been a lot of challenges that had to be overcome. Obviously, none as big as this one, I guess, but there just seems to be, I don't know, I would love to see just many more pilot events and just test events run with different concepts, because I know promoters, venue operators are racking their brains, and the government seems to make its decisions based on, I don't know what parameters, but doesn't always seem to be based on the most
on the science of our industry. No.
Well, so pandemic aside, like, what are the next months gonna look like? Is it all rescheduling and waiting for a date? How are you spending your days these days, professional wise?
Sure.
Well, we've now kind of got a date. So government in Britain has now given a not before date, and that for us, well, there are 2 dates, but the first date doesn't work for us because the limit on the capacity is so low, it's not viable for us. But the second date, which is 21st of June, is apparently going to allow us to open without social distancing, if a whole lot of caveats, are met and so on. And so Lucy and the team are now madly working out what that means in terms of what can happen when. And we're certainly going to try and have some activity before the proms. The proms is at the end of July, I think, Lucy, that they start.
Yeah,
and they're doing it. They're going to do a sort of slightly smaller proms, and then after the proms, it's just an absolute car park of concerts. I mean, we're just so busy then for the rest of the year and all of next year, and in fact most 23 now. So it's just, yeah, it's full on from this point.
Well, I have just a couple of more questions, which is one to each, both of you. Like, what do you have like a philosophy when it comes to running, you know, the team, or in your respective role, running the building and the teams that work under you? Do you have a philosophy?
Lucy, you go first.
I always say to the guys, you know, work hard, but have lots of fun as well. I think it's important to have fun at work. And I always acknowledge that I don't know everything. So there's people in my teams who will come in and tell me about an artist who I haven't heard of. And it's really important that, you know, you embrace your whole team and you're all working together towards a common goal. And you know, and just to be kind to people is really important to me in terms of how I kind of manage the workforce.
And I suppose mine is you just let people, hire people that are really good at what they do and let them do their job is my thing. You know, I've been a promoter and I've run a marketing department and I've run organizations, and so I kind of know, but like same with Lucy, I don't know everything, and I'd rather hire really good people and give them the autonomy and devolve the responsibility to them to do what they do really well. You know, keep an eye on things, and always I like to be asked my opinion from time to time, and occasionally they do ask me. and God forbid, I even suggest things, Gideon, and they never get up, but I do still feel like I suggest the odd thing. Lucy goes, yes, Craig, thank you. We'll take that on board. No, really, no. Empower people who are clever and good at what they do to do what they do. That's my advice, and that seems to work pretty well, I think. And certainly the whole, as Lucy said, we've got a great team who are really keen to do what they do, and they do it really well. So let them do it, man.
And Lucy, looking back on your, you know, time with the Hall, is there
20 years, Gideon?
Is there anything you're particularly proud of?
I'm proud of most things that I've done, really, but I since I've become a director in the last, I think it's 5 or 6 years, I can't remember now. That's when I you know, you can really make a difference, I suppose, as you become more senior in an organisation, and just putting on more of our events, shaping the programme more, becoming a in-house promoter, dare we say it. You know, that's been a great step forward for the Hall.
And what was your biggest mistake, Lucy, in those 20 years? No, don't. No, I'm not interviewing you. Don't.
I have no regrets about anything. No.
Well, I mean, you mentioned like I mean, I felt like when we last spoke, you had just begun promoting in-house, and back then you kind of were able to assure all the promoters, like, you're not going into the, you know, the massive rock and pop fields. Is that kind of still the strategy
it is really, yeah, because all those big rock and pop people have relationships with the major promoters. We sometimes do that, but we always do it with the promoter's blessing, and it's often a one-off kind of special performance, which isn't part of a tour. Yeah. And they kind of seem good with that. So
yeah, we've got enough to do without taking that on.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much. There was so much to talk about. Like, one of the hardest things about this interview was just, you know, coming up with questions to try and keep it within an hour. And since we're almost there, I was hoping you could maybe end with like just speak from the heart, like what this past year without live events. I mean, that might be another upside in quotation marks of the pandemic, is that you just know what you're lacking. I mean, I know so hardcore how much I want to go back to a live show, and I don't even care really what it is at this point. But can you maybe, you know, taking the past year into account, this strange year, this unbelievable year, which is so much cause for celebration, and yeah, just, you know, jumble that up and to present your state of mind in March 2021.
Shall I have a go? So we I remember the day Lucy and I sat down, and it was looking bad, and we both said, I think we have to close. The government's going to mandate that we close. So the day we decided to close, that evening the West End all closed, and the next day we closed. I think it was St. Patrick's Day last year. And we all sort of said goodbye and walked out, but in a very kind of casual way. We had no idea we'd be closed for so long. And for me, it absolutely is just missing and yearning for that live experience again. But equally, I'd say, and Lucy alluded to this before, it's also the team. It's, you know, when I'm at the hall, I'll go for a wander around and go and see the building services guys and go and talk to the crew and talk to the tour guides and pop into the kitchen. I mean, it's just having the team of the Royal Albert Hall around you every day, and everyone's so committed to what they do, and they feel so part of delivering the experience for the audience or the artists or whatever. I miss that so much. You know, we work in an industry which is so much about people, and I've been stuck in this attic for a year, and I just miss it. I just miss the people from the hall most of all, as much as the shows, I would say.
And it's the same for me. I really miss seeing people. And to begin with, it was quite nice to work from home for a while, and then you realize that you're missing a huge part of your life that enriches your soul. You know, music is a huge part of my life. I studied music. It's just everything that I do and we do as a family, actually. And I really miss that. And we did get to go in to see a couple of Christmas shows that we put on in December, and it was wonderful to get out and see live performance again. And it really made you realize how much, you know, we've all missed it.
Yeah, then I mean, all that remains to be hoped is that the Royal Albert Hall will be soon again the place where all those experiences that you both just summarized will happen again very soon. I mean, is there anything you want to add at all to, I don't know, Pollstar readers in particular, like promoters, agents, like other fellow venue operators, or the fans? Anything you feel we haven't touched on that you would like people to know?
I suppose I probably would like to just talk about the hall a bit and say something, end on a positive. You know, one of the things I've always worked on in my life, and I've always worked in the performing arts, not always in music, but in opera and theatre and all sorts of things. And I particularly am for access to what we do. You know, what we do is so amazing, and I want as many people as possible to experience the power of an opera or a ballet or a rock concert or whatever. And what I love about the Royal Albert Hall is, I always say this, it's such a special place for the audience. Everyone, when you go there as a member of the audience, you feel like you're walking into a palace. And for the artists, we know that it's really special to go onto that hallowed ground, that stage, and perform there is something to notch up on the belt of your career. And you know that when you see the Adele DVD or you talk to Ed Sheeran and so on, it's a really important thing. But actually what overarches all of it is that it's accessible. You know, so many artists have performed on that stage, so many school children perform on that stage. And the audience, it all walks of life. And I love that about the hall, that it's a democratic space for artists and audiences. It's special, but it's accessible. And I think that's really, really special about it.
Lucy, do you want any closing words, like address to the industry, a message of maybe, you know, positivity?
Yeah, well, I would just say, I mean, obviously this doesn't reach internationally, but just to thank all the promoters and the artists and the agents and managers just for supporting us and other venues through this. And it's not been easy having to reschedule a year's worth of events, and it's been extremely difficult, actually, and challenging. But actually the promoters and everyone involved have been supportive of us, and just thank you for all of their support over the years leading up to 150th anniversary, and hopefully in the future too.
Great. Well, those were all my questions.